Today's lesson is vocabulary about parts of an algebraic expression. So it's really going to be just learning the different vocabulary words that are centered around those expressions. So first, I would like for you to open up your math journal and in your table of contents, write this title, Parts of an Algebraic Expression. You're going to label that with whatever page number you're on, and then turn to that page and put this title at the margin of that page as well. So if you need to pause your video, go ahead and do that and resume playing when you're finished getting your math journal updated. So you should have with you the notes page that says parts of an algebraic expression up at the top. And the first thing that we're going to talk about here are these different types of parts of the algebraic expression. Okay, so down below here you have 5x plus 2. 5x plus 2 is an expression. You can notice that it doesn't have an equal sign, but this is an algebraic expression, and each part of this has its own vocabulary word associated with it. So we're going to go ahead and start with the 5. Up at the top, you see this word coefficient. So this 5 is called a coefficient, and this is the number that's being multiplied by a variable. So a coefficient will always be right next to a variable. And we know that when we have two things right next to each other, it's being multiplied. So 5x means 5 times x. Okay, but it's really important that you know that this word or this vocabulary word coefficient, we're going to start using this a lot. Okay, so a coefficient, again, is the number being multiplied by the variable. If you need to pause your video, take a second to write that down. I also color coordinated these. If you want to do the same thing and color in each part of this expression, you may absolutely do that. Okay, just make sure that you're able to get your video finished. So maybe you want to do this part later, the coloring part later. Our next vocabulary word is a variable, and I already know that so many of you are familiar with this word. So a variable is an unknown value that is represented by a letter. So you're going to have to go ahead and write that down. Again, a variable is an unknown value that is represented by a letter. Okay, so I know I'm going to have to multiply 5 by something. I just don't know what that something is yet. Okay, and this should sound familiar. Lots of you already knew that word, variable. Okay, and another word that you probably already know is operation. So here in the light blue, we have the vocabulary word operation. Here's an example of one. Addition is an example of an operation. And go ahead and get this written in your math journal here. An operation is an action or procedure such as adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. There's also exponents. Exponents is an operation. And then you'll start to get more advanced with operations like square roots and things later on in life. But for now, we're really just going to focus on the adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. And then the next word is a constant. So this is a value that stays the same or it stands alone. So when I say it stays the same, I'm not saying that it can't be added to something to change. I'm just saying that it's not being multiplied by a variable. It's standing by itself. So this 2 is always going to be a 2. I'm not going to multiply it by something to make it larger or anything like that. So it's just a number by itself. You could think of it like he's constantly alone. Okay, so make sure you have all 4 of these boxes filled in with the vocabulary definitions. And then we just have a few more to talk about. Next, I have the next vocabulary word is a term. The vocabulary word is term. And you can see here I have this word written twice. So I have 5x, and this whole thing here, let me grab a color here. 5x, this is one term. Okay, they kind of go together in the sense that they're right next to each other. And then I also have another term over here, which is just the 2, the constant, 2 is a term by itself. Okay, and the reason why 5x is a term and then 2 is a term is because these are variables and constants that are separated by an operation. Okay, so I have 5x here is separated by this addition sign. So this is a term, and then this is a term because that's what's being separated by that addition symbol. Okay, so this example has two terms. 5x is the first term and 2 is the second term. So I should be able to ask you a question, well, how many terms are there? And you should be able to count like, oh, it has 2, or oh, it has 3 terms. Okay, so that is going to be expected of you. The next vocabulary word is algebraic expression. So this whole thing, 5x plus 2, is an algebraic expression. This is a mathematical phrase that contains variables, constants, and operations. So basically, it's the whole kit and caboodle, okay? It's everything that is written here. So 5x plus 2 is the algebraic expression. Okay, so let's go ahead and practice this a little bit more. Down below, we see the sentence, an algebraic expression does not have an equal sign. So if you look at our example up here, we have 5x plus 2. There is no equal sign here. Okay, so an expression is missing the equal sign. When you see the equal sign, then it becomes an equation. So for right now, for our purposes, we're just going to focus on the expression. So all things without an equal sign. And here's an expression for you. 2x plus 4y plus 6 minus 2y minus 9. So this one is much longer than the first example that I've given you, but we're going to dissect this and identify the different parts of this expression. Okay, the first one is the terms. So they're just asking you to find each term. Okay, so the first one I have written down is 2x. I'm going to grab my highlighter tool. This is a term by itself. Okay, now if you remember from up above, a term is a variable or constant that is separated by the operation. Okay, so now I'm seeing I have plus 4y. So what's being separated by that operation is that 4y. Okay, then here's another term. I have 6x. Now I did attach the negative sign onto this next term, so I have negative 2y. I did attach this because it is a negative, and the reason why I did attach it is because if we think back to our last unit when we were adding and subtracting integers, we could have said that we could add the opposite. Okay, so I could turn this into adding negative 2y, and we're actually going to do that a lot in the couple days to come. We're going to do this. So taking away 2y is saying the same thing as adding a negative 2y. So that's how I turned that one into, and I wrote it this way on purpose, is that negative 2y. That's how I got the negative 2y. Okay, so then the same thing over here for another term, I put negative 9 because when we go to simplify this in the future, I am going to have you turn this into adding the opposite, so it would become adding a negative 9, and that's how I got the negative 9. So here's our complete list of terms: 2x, 4y, 6x, negative 2y, and negative 9. Next, we're going to go on to coefficients. So remember, coefficients, I'm going to go back up here for a second, is the number being multiplied by the variable. Okay, so if I'm looking, I'm just working from the equation and both what I wrote right here. So I see 2x, the coefficient here is the 2 because 2 times x, the 2 is being multiplied by x. So in this one, I have a 2. Okay, I can underline it here. That's my coefficient. Next, I have the 4y. So I'm multiplying 4 times y. So 4 is the coefficient. And then I have 6x. 6 times x, so 6 is the coefficient. And then I have plus the negative 2y, so negative 2 times y, negative 2 is the coefficient. And then I get to the last one, and I have negative 9. But when you look at negative 9, there is no variable. So since there's no variable, this means that this cannot be a coefficient. So we would not put negative 9 here. There's just not going to be a coefficient for that one. Okay, so then in the next part, so opposite of that, a constant is a number that stands alone. So in this one, we only have one number that stands alone, and that's that negative 9. So that would go, I just kind of lined it all up. Sorry about the bell there. I just kept it in line from what I had above. So my only constant in this example is negative 9. We can just X those out. There's no other constants in this example. Moving and grooving. So now we need to list the variables. This part should be fairly easy for you guys. I just lined them up. 2x, x is the variable. 4y, y is the variable. 6x, where x is the variable. And then in negative 2y, y is the variable. Negative 9, there is no variable, so it gets an x. Oh, actually, you know what? That might look like we have an x over here. So why don't we just leave that one blank? I don't want it to look like we wrote down x as a variable. Okay, then, so here's a new thing. We have to find the like terms. So up above, we've already listed the terms. So now what they're asking us to do are find the ones that are alike. So how are terms alike? Well, they have to have the same variable, and they also have the same exponent. Okay, so in this example, I don't see any exponents, so we're going to pretty much essentially just ignore that for the time being. But I do have to have the same variable. So I'm looking at my first example, and I have a 2x. Okay, so I'm going to use purple for this one, and I then am looking for something that has x as a variable as well. So I'm going across here, and I see 6x. So those are like terms, 2x and 6x, because they have the same variable. Also, let's see, I'm going to erase this up here. So when we get more into, we're going to end up simplifying. Oop, I don't want blue. Simplifying expressions. Okay, and that's going to be like combining like terms is what that is called. So we're going to have to find all of these terms that are alike so that we can combine them. Okay, so we got 2x and 6x are alike. And then I'm also seeing more terms, so I'm going to find if there's any more that match, and I see a 4y. Well, I also see over here this negative 2 has a y with it, so those are alike. Okay, and then in this example, I have one constant, which is negative 9. There are no other constants, so it is by itself. So we could actually write in here negative 9 is a like term by itself. Oh, there's the bell again. Okay, so then the last one is just to ask you to identify the operations. So here you have an addition, addition, subtraction, subtraction. Okay, so now it's your turn to try and match or identify all the vocabulary words that we just learned. Okay, so you have this example, 5x plus 2y plus 9y plus 4. And I want you to identify each part of that. I've already kind of helped you out over here. I couldn't hide this little guy. The 4 is a constant, so you need to go ahead and identify all the other parts of this expression. Okay, go ahead and pause your video, try that, and then when you're finished and you think you've identified anything, you could go ahead and press play, and then you'll check your work with my work. Okay, so I went ahead and drew arrows on here because it was difficult for me to type all of this. Um, so I just put coefficient and then variable, and then I had arrows pointing to what everything was. So 5x is, or 5 is a coefficient, so I had that arrow pointing to the coefficient. But then x is a variable, so I had that arrow pointing to variable. And then with 2y, the 2 is the coefficient, the y is the variable. 9y, 9 is the coefficient, y is the variable. And then this one was given to you, the 4 is the constant. Okay, but then we should also be able to identify just a little bit more than what I just gave you. So 5x, 2y, 9y, and 4, these are all terms. Okay, so we're going to write that here, terms. Okay, so in this example, there are 4 terms. Okay, the whole thing, I'll use another color. Let's go with this one. The whole kibit and caboodle, this is called an algebraic expression. And if we wanted to, we could go even further by identifying which are the like terms. Okay, so in this example, we only have 2 like terms, so maybe we want to list those here. Like terms are, I'm looking at, this one has an x, but I don't see anything else with an x, so I have 2y and 9y. So my like terms are 2y and 9y. Okay, so that is it for the notes. I want you to go ahead and fold this in half, get this taped into your math journal, and then once that is completed, you're going to grab this sheet off of the table or from the teacher, and then you're going to practice doing just what we did, but this time I just narrowed it down to coefficients, constant, and like terms. So when you're working on this, I want you to list the coefficients, list if there's any constants, and then tell me the things that are alike. Okay, so I took out variables and operations and things like that because those are easier for us to identify. So these are the 3 new ones that I want us to really focus on. Okay, that's it. Thank you and have a great day.